There are a lot of things you can't legally get fired for in the United States, but your weight isn't one of them. That's right. Despite over 40% of Americans reporting they've experienced weight discrimination, weight is not a protected class at the federal level. So why is weight-based discrimination still legal in the United States? And what can be done to effect change?
There are a few cities across the United States that specifically prohibit weight or appearance discrimination, and Michigan remains still today the only state with a law that prohibits weight discrimination.
So if you look at the Elliott Larson Act, that sought to give a lot of protections, not just on the basis of size, but on the basis of race, gender, and other issues. So because it became part of a larger issue, I think that's what got it across the finish line.
Weight discrimination isn't going away on its own, especially when it's so deeply embedded in powerful institutions and public opinion. Recent research finds that Americans' unconscious bias on the basis of race, sexual orientation, and age are dropping, but when it comes to weight, bias is going up.
There was a patient of mine that was applying for a job as a unit secretary in the hospital. This particular person that applied was very well qualified for this particular role. I happened to walk past the nurse's room as they were deliberating about whether or not she was a good candidate. I heard the following comments. How is she gonna do this job? Have you seen how big she is? Not anything about the different degrees or certifications that she had that made her appropriate for this work, or her glowing letters of recommendation. I wasn't part of the selection committee, but I did hear this deliberation, and I couldn't share with her that the reason she wasn't selected had nothing to do with her qualifications. It had everything to do with her size.
Obesity-related wage gaps have been found in the United States, China, and Chile, among other countries, with the stigma and disparity being especially severe for women.
Economists call these employment penalties wage penalties. They tend to compound with the other types of discriminatory penalties that we already know exist in the labor market.
So let's look at a Black woman who happens to be of size. She has race discrimination, and that there's a wage gap due to race, okay? She happens to be a woman, so that there's a wage gap being a woman, and happens to be a Black woman, which then is another modifier. And then she happens to be a person of size. So if you look at the data, that Black woman will be making somewhere between 55 and 69 cents to every white man in the same role.
In February of 2022, Massachusetts lawmakers introduced a bill to prohibit body size discrimination. If it passes, it could demonstrate a path forward for other states to do the same.
I have been speaking on this issue at the State House, bringing patients with me to talk about their personal experiences, because I think those lived experiences really capture what people feel and what their daily struggles are in this space.
Law is a signal, and law is a signal of a value that the government takes sufficiently seriously that we want to change what we're doing in the United States.
In the meantime, what can be done in the workplace now?
Employers should think about stereotypes that they engage in, especially in larger companies where there are human resources departments. They're already in the practice of doing regular trainings of employees. Weight would just simply be another part of the training.
I think it's really important for us to all take a deep dive within ourselves, right? Because change begins with self, to discern whether or not we have these biases. Until you start to see people in leadership that are of size, on a consistent basis, which is about half the population. So it's not like it's hard to find individuals. Or until we get to see that, every team has this diversity in the team. And by diversity, we're talking about race, gender, size, etc. And we can begin to have the world that we all desire, which is a cohesive world where people are judged based upon their character and not their aesthetic appearance.
Change the conversation about weight stigma in your workplace by advocating for bias training, being conscientious of your own behavior, and calling out discrimination when you see it. Combat weight-based discrimination by having conversations with your elected officials and workplace representatives today.